Welcome into another episode of The Mic is Open. I'm your host, Alan Hoshida, and as always, thank you for coming along and listening or watching if you're on YouTube. This is a good one. This is a real good one. We're bringing on the radio voice, the only radio voice of the San Jose Sharks, Mr. Dan Rusanowsky, the Hall of Famer himself. We are going to talk about what this team can do, the San Jose Sharks, to get better next year, what they've already done. We're also going to talk about his time in San Jose and how he came over here and really made it a home. And he's never left, and he's entrenched himself. He's also a wine guy, so we're going to maybe talk about a little bit of wine. And also, as always, we wrap things up with some hockey dad advice. He is not a dad himself, but I'm sure he has plenty of advice to give dads out there who are raising their kids in this sport. So hope you learned some things about Dan Rusanowsky. He's a theater kid like myself, so it should be some fun. All right, let's get right to it. Okay, here we go. The mic is open. Dan Rusanowsky, the Hall of Famer, Sharks voice on the radio, the only one us fans growing up has ever heard, and now it's weird to be on the other side and getting to work with you. So that's been a pleasure in itself. But I open this podcast, as always, Dan, with the mic is open. Is there anything you need to get off your chest? Anything you want to enlighten us on? Anything at all, my friend?
Well, what I can tell you, Alan, is that I'm really excited not only to be with you here today, but also about the upcoming season for San Jose Sharks hockey. I think it's another big step forward for the franchise. We're excited about the group of players that they have, and I'm really excited for an upcoming season that's going to be fun to call and certainly memorable to look at when it's all over and said and done.
Yeah, let's start right there with the Sharks. And they've done a lot this offseason. My career's been a busy guy. You know, the July 1st, did some things, but it's been like the weeks after that have really come and solidified this roster, in my opinion, some veterans. What have you thought of the job he's done so far this offseason?
Well, it's been excellent. First of all, he and the staff have done an outstanding job in manipulating the roster and making sure that the money was cleared out, that it was available to maximize their options. And then they've done a really good job in drafting these last several years. And I think we're starting to see some of the fruit bear, but there's a long way to go before that all gets really realized. Yet I think that they've added to the defense. They've made that better. They've added a veteran goaltender to go along with Yaroslav Askarov. And of course, the people that they've drafted this year are going to be pushing, actually, at a very young age, as we saw last year with Celebrini and Smith, to get an opportunity at the NHL level. So it's going to be a fun training camp.
Is there a signing that stands out to you as maybe a pivotal one for this group coming into the season?
I don't know if there's any one in particular, but I just like the tone of all of them. They're trying to find more Tyler Toffoli types. That is, guys that are coming in here with a real bit of experience to share, but also a real penchant for trying to help the team learn how to win. And you've got people like John Klingberg and Dmitry Orlov and Nick Leddy. All of these guys have varying degrees of experience. Leddy's won a Stanley Cup like Toffoli has. And so they join Toffoli and Alex Wenberg, and of course, Jeff Skinner being another one of those new veterans that's scored a lot of points in his career. These are guys that I think are going to be major players this season. And I haven't even gotten down to the next level where we get Gaudette and Kurashev on at the forward position. That's going to really solidify the team's depth, and they can play in a variety of positions and roles. So I think that that's something to be really excited about for the team this year.
What is next, though? We saw the dev camp. We saw Michael Misa look pretty good there in that fun scrimmage where guys were just having a good time. Sam Dickinson was skating through everyone, looked like he was playing with a lot of confidence. Quentin Musty, Igor Chernyshov. I mean, the list goes on with this prospect pool. But what is next here as we approach training camp for San Jose?
Well, the next thing, obviously, from the players' point of view, is to make sure that they're in preparation for what's going to be a very challenging training camp. I think that some of these young kids that had a good time at the development camp are going to find out that the actual National Hockey League training camp is going to be much more difficult and challenging. And all they have to do is talk to some of the guys that have been through it before. But I think that they're ramping that up this season, that the Sharks have torn down the roster, as we say, and now we're ready to start building it up. And that's going to be interesting to see who decides to step forward at the start of the season to be ready to be on that roster. And it's going to be a very competitive training camp, I think, for those players. So they've got to make sure that they're in shape, which they all do these days. They have to make sure that they're prepared for what's to come, and I think that they will be.
Well, Coach Warsofsky, his very first training camp, that was something everyone noticed who was around the team. Those practices were intense. He was getting guys in shape and he was setting the tone early. So I expect nothing else here as you enter in late September, mid-September, and get this going. What's your biggest question though about this group, about the young guys, the vets? Is there questions that you feel like still need to be answered here, or the biggest questions?
I think that the first two things that have to come to mind for me are A, the players that have had either off-season surgery or getting over injuries, have had injury problems. Are they healthy and are they prepared to go for the 82-game schedule? You saw Shakir Mukhamadullin, who played so well in the second half of the season for the team, showing that he's a National Hockey League level defenseman, but now he, has to get over the injury that he rehabbed over the summer. Several other players like that. I mean, John Klingberg only played a handful of games before the playoffs, although he did help the Edmonton Oilers last year. And Dmitry Orlov's another defenseman that I think is going to have a kind of a second lease on life in leading a young guy like Mukhamadullin around. So that's going to be the other factor. And then the other thing I'm thinking about is just exactly how these new guys are going to meld in. As I mentioned earlier, Tyler Toffoli worked out really well, not only as somebody who worked well with his line mates, but also provided leadership. And I think that in the presence of people like Kurashev and Gaudette and Skinner and Klingberg and Orlov and Leddy, that's exactly what they're looking for. Then the other thing that's going to be interesting is to see how the goaltending situation matches up. Yeah. Right now, you've got Nedeljkovic with Yaroslav Askarov, and I think that's a really solid combination of a young up-and-coming star goaltender with a guy who's just a total capable professional veteran and somebody who's been through the ups and downs of goaltending in the NHL. So how many games will each of those guys play? And, of course, Askarov has had, as has Nedeljkovic, their share of injuries. So how will that hold up during the course of the year, too?
And Nedeljkovic knew Ryan Warsofsky going back to his earlier days, so that's something he's comfortable with. We heard that in his press conference. Other things you heard pretty much across the board, just how excited all these veterans are to come in to play with these young guys. And yeah, they only had 20 wins last year, but they were in every single third period. It seemed like the numbers, if you dug into it, looked better than the actual outcome. What is progress for you now as we enter this season, maybe third full year of this kind of rebuild situation with San Jose?
Well, if you look at some of the other teams' development over the last few years, you can probably see a track for the Sharks. I'm thinking of Anaheim, for instance, last season. That was a team that's a little bit further along in their rebuild than the Sharks were at the beginning of last year. And they took a major step forward, I thought. They were in the conversation about the playoffs a lot longer. They made a major set of strides to get to that position. And they did fall just short of getting into the playoffs. A team like that, a team like Utah last season, that's kind of an area where I think the Sharks as a goal could be. So, you're talking, if you're going to get to real hard numbers, a really good step forward for the Sharks would be 34 wins and 80 points. That's not enough to get into the playoffs, I don't think, but it is a major step forward from where they were the last 2 years. And before anybody says, well, back in 1993, the Sharks went from 24 points to making the playoffs and beating the Red Wings in the first round. I think as we look back at that, that's as amazing an event and an amazing a turnaround in one single season that we'll ever see. It's not as likely that that's going to happen, but boy, you never know how it all could turn out, and that's the beauty of the sport.
Well, Drew was talking about that last offseason. I'm sure that's going to be what he's going to talk about coming in this season, because he's always the optimist. And it's good to be optimistic as you enter the year because no games have been played. So you might as well be optimistic before they drop the puck, right? You don't want to be pessimistic already. You want to at least have some joy.
Well, exactly, and we are optimistic. I think that I think this is going to be a fun team to watch and to listen to, and I think also the team is definitely going to take another step forward. Part of that is the adjustment of Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith to coming into a league now where they have some experience, but also where the other team knows them and knows what they can do. And, we've seen this time and time again where you've had some success as a rookie, and then you come in for your sophomore season and you find that you have to make some adjustments because the other teams are more prepared for you and for dealing with you. And I think we're going to see that. Of course, I have no doubt that those two guys can take another major step forward. Celebrini had an amazing campaign, especially given the fact that he missed a handful of games because of injury. And
Yeah.
all Smith did was get better every single game that he was on the ice. By the end of the season, he was just a regular contributor. And let's not forget, he scored 18 goals. He had 45 points last year. Celebrini had 63. So the Sharks are in really good shape with those two guys. William Eklund, another guy who has seen some of that sophomore attention, now is coming back for a more seasoned performance and with a new contract. And I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to him taking another major step forward too.
Will Smith scored 18 and didn't score for like the first month, so he's trending in the right direction. All those young guys are going to step up. You've seen it all. You've seen that 91 season, the 93 season. You've seen the joys of the 2000s and making a push for the Stanley Cup seemingly every single year. Then you see the teardown and everything. We're ending season 34 for you here with the San Jose Sharks, the only voice of the San Jose Sharks on the radio. What keeps you going still, man?
I love this game. I love the challenge of bringing the picture to my audience. The fact that it is a very intimate medium, that a radio broadcaster only presents half of the story. The other half is in the imagination of the person who listens to it and who creates that picture in their mind. And that's why radio broadcasts are very intimate entities. The fact is that they have a life of their own. You have to make sure that it is a natural, organic sort of experience for the fans. You know that when you get upset, the fans are going to. When you get excited, they're going to too. But the best and most fulfilling part of it is that you're doing it together.
How did you find those moments? When to pump the energy, when to pull back, and how long did it feel like you found your groove? Or was it years, or what was it that you needed to find those points of emphasis?
Well, I don't know. I think we're always still looking for the perfect broadcast, and we're
Yeah.
also looking for that feeling each and every season. And it's very different because the game's changed. It has changed since I came into the NHL, and it will continue to evolve and morph into something I think that's even better. But you're always looking for the right combination of those things. You have to make sure that you edit your story properly, and you have to do that on the fly, obviously. But you also really draw on that experience over the course of many, many seasons to get better and to make sure that something that is as unexpected for a young person isn't as unexpected for you, and you know how to handle it.
Yeah, I mean, truth be told, that's something that I'm still trying to learn here as entering my second season with San Jose as a pre and post game host. It's always about trying to figure that out. And I look to people who've been in this industry, whether it's play by play, whether it's host. I love to see their confidence and the calm, and they always, like yourself, always seem to be in control of the moment. Well, no matter what's going on, the chaos around you, you're just in control. And I want to find that.
Well, the most important lesson you have to learn is the show must go on. And oftentimes when you think you've done something catastrophic, if the show goes on, oftentimes some people don't even notice it. And that's something to remember. Also, you have to learn to have a sense of humor about yourself and enjoy what you're doing. And
Yeah.
even if it doesn't go well. And nothing is perfect, as I said. We make mistakes, we have opportunities, our mouths get stuck. You know, a lot of different things happen during the course of a broadcast. But the big part of it, though, is to make sure that you're prepared when you go in and when that headset comes on and when the microphone turns on. And as they say in television, when the red light comes on and you're live, then you're prepared for anything that you might be able to handle. And it just goes very smoothly after that.
Yeah, last year was a huge learning curve, and hopefully we're going to move in the second year with more experiences ready to go, more homework ready, because, things happened later in the offseason last year, so it's kind of a whirlwind just to get into the year. Now, a little more prepared, can kind of go through some media notes and everything else coming into the season and not feeling like it's all thrown against you. But you talked about how the industry has changed over the 40 plus years you've been in it. Has your advice to young broadcasters, play-by-play, anybody, whoever it is, has that changed because of the medians changed and broadcasting as a whole has changed, or has it stayed kind of consistent throughout the years?
I'd say it's pretty consistent. That part of it isn't all that different. I think you want to make sure that you understand the business that you're in if you're going to be a professional announcer. And that means understanding who pays the bills and exactly what it means to deal with sponsors and to make sure that you read those drop ins properly and in a way that's exciting and fun and makes it very lively for the listener to understand. But beyond that, also, to make sure you stay with the technology. The fact that it is changing so much, the fact that we're doing this interview the way that we're doing it is,
Yeah.
is really an incredible thing for me. And I've utilized that quite a bit. It's allowed us on the Sharks Audio Network to expand what we can provide to all of our fans. In fact, I'm editing down a couple of different interviews that I've done here with some of the prospects, and I think that presents a nice spotlight, as we call it, for these guys as they go through their summers and get ready for the training camp, and it gives the fans a chance to get to know them on a long form basis. So that's something that has really changed over the course of time. But really, it's keeping up with the technology, the fact that you have to make sure that you are on all platforms, as it were.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Sharks Audio Network using the Sharks Plus the app, or whether you're using the website, or whether you're listening on satellite radio or on our terrestrial radio network. We have all of those options available for our fans. And the other thing you have to remember too is that when you're using this great technology of streaming, especially, you're speaking not only to your local community, but you're speaking to the world, and you have to balance those two things to understand that there's a very large audience potentially out there, many of whom are not necessarily right in your neighborhood, but you can't forget about the ones that are in your neighborhood. So those are all the things you have to think about that I tell young people.
I think it's great advice. And obviously, there's things in there that I can soak up and learn from. And I think the advice part of when you find a mentor is huge. I mean, I go back to I don't have this job unless I was an intern at NBC Sports. And those internships, I know there's a lot that talk about internships, but it was key for me about getting into this industry, about getting your foot in the door. And once you get that foot in the door, it's what you make of that opportunity.
Well, the old saying in the stock market world is ask for the order, ask for the
Mhm.
business, ask for the opportunity. And that's what you should definitely do. And obviously you did that. I did that when I got started. And those were people that were able to take me seriously and listen to what I was looking to do, and saw something in me that I could do that job, and give me the confidence, because you're asking for the opportunity to do something that you dream about, but you're
Yeah.
still a little bit scared and you're not really sure if they'll have confidence in you that you could do it. And so that's the other factor, is that you have to make sure you measure that, and you have a nice balance of being nervous is good, but also utilizing that to your best advantage.
100%. It's what I struggle with because at the end of the day, I've been a Sharks fan, a biased Sharks fan for so long, what, 30 plus years. And then now it's shifted into a different mold. And we work for NBC Sports California, who are partners with the San Jose Sharks. But at some point, you still gotta ride the line a little bit. You can't go complete homer, right? You can, but then sometimes you're not taken seriously. So it's riding that line that I'm still learning about, especially third periods. Last year was a litmus test because every third period, it seemed like the outcome was never, we didn't know. And so you didn't go into post game knowing a whole lot of what the show is going to look like because you just had to fly with it. And when I get really energetic and I have a lot of kinetic energy, that's when things go off the rails. That's where my mouth gets stuck. And that's when I try to form sentences that aren't there. And so that is the biggest learning thing that I'm trying to take forward, is using that energy, like you talked about, in a productive manner so that it sounds like I know what I'm talking about, even if I'm like all amped up inside.
Well, that's where you learn how to breathe during the course of your show. And remember that if you do breathe a little bit, it's not going to hurt anybody. And of course, you've got the ambiance, at least in our case, in the arena, of the
Yeah.
crowd in the background and so forth. But again, sometimes you go back and you listen to exactly how you're using your time. and you realize you have more time to do things than you thought. And that's part of it. The other part of it is related to what you're talking about, being a homer. One thing you should never do is be that. And in fact, you have to remember that you're a professional. This marketplace does not accept that. And, I think you want to make sure that you balance that by understanding you're getting more excited when good things are happening for the Sharks, in part because your audience feels that way. Most
Mm-hmm.
of your audience, most of the people that are either watching or listening are definitely Sharks fans. There are some who are not, and you have to respect that. And you also have to respect the fact that this is the greatest game in the world. And, if Sidney Crosby does something great, you should feel excited about that, even if it is negative, and you can express that kind of balance, that walk that tightrope between expressing the disappointment that a Sharks fan might feel and the anger about it, along with the fact that it was just an amazing, exciting play, and tip your hockey helmet to another one of those great players like Sidney Crosby. And so I think that other teams are going to do that with Celebrini and with Smith and with Misa in the future, and so many others. And I think that that's the other factor, that we're not just selling the team, we're also selling the game to
Yeah.
everybody. And that's exceedingly important.
The game's never been in a better spot where it comes to the type of talent that's out there. And I just love hockey, always have. Even when I was covering the WHL, I just loved going to hockey games and I loved being there and feeling that atmosphere. And it just takes you back to being a kid. So if we could sell that game, that's what we want to talk about. And on that kind of note, what are some memorable calls that will always stick out to you when you think about the games you've called over your career? What, over almost 2,500?
Over 2,500.
There you go.
Well, I'd say that, I even go back to some of the great games that I was privileged to call before I got to the National Hockey League. Calling in the Calder Cup final in 1989 with the New Haven Nighthawks was a big, big thrill for me. For so long, we worked so hard for the team to make a step forward. And finally, a year that nobody really expected that they would do it, they ended up going all the way to the Calder Cup final, playing the Adirondack Red Wings. And they didn't win that Calder Cup final, but it was some of the most exciting hockey ever seen in the city of New Haven, Connecticut, for pro hockey teams. Before that, I went to St. Lawrence University and got my start in being able to call the NCAA playoffs in Madison, Wisconsin, against a Badger team that was on its way to winning a national championship. And the fact that I was able to, in that particular game, call a contest and call the names of Chris Chelios and Bruce Driver and several other National Hockey League players that were about to be National Hockey League players, I should say, I think was a great thrill. But since the Sharks have come in, all of that's been eclipsed by what's happening to me in the NHL. My first game was the first game ever in the history of the Sharks, and it was a radio-only game. It was not televised in the Bay Area. So the only recording that we have of a Sharks broadcast of the very first game in history is mine on what was then KNEW 910 radio in San Francisco. We were on that station for a couple of years, and that was a special moment. The fact that we were able to, even some of the losses, these are memorable calls too. The 13-1 loss in Calgary back in 1993, George Kingston had said, listen, let's forget about this second season. We know it's a tough year. We know that we're an expansion team, not like today's expansion treatment. And so let's just have a training camp for a couple of days, and let's make believe our record is 0-0, and we'll start things off the rest of the way. Team takes a 1-0 lead when Johan Garpenlov scores a goal, and the final score was 13-1. Whoops, didn't work so well. But those are things you remember, especially when you have success. Especially when I got to call a game in the Stanley Cup final. That was just such a memorable series against the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2016. The Sharks were 2 wins away from winning the entire thing. And to see the Stanley Cup handed out, albeit to the Penguins at SAP Center, was something that I think a lot of people said would never happen. You'd never see the Stanley Cup in the building, let alone being handed out to a team. And yet it was to Pittsburgh, and I'm looking forward to the time when that turns around and when San Jose Sharks fans get to see their team win that Stanley Cup and carry it around the building.
I think you said something early on about New Haven and the early. Oh, my dog decided today now's a really good time to bark and go crazy. But you said something early on about New Haven and your early memories. And I think that's important to young broadcasters out there. especially local news where you have guys coming in and you kind of know on the local circuit or when you're moving up, where you are has to feel super important. It has to feel like your Super Bowl wherever it is, because that you owe that to your viewers. You owe that to your listeners that you're covering that team. If you're doing a report for that team, they have to make it feel like it is the most important thing in the world, even if you're in market 120 like it was for me or 195. Whatever it is that you're covering has to feel super important because it is to your viewers and to your listeners out there.
Well, it is super important. The fact that you're able to participate in a profession that you've always dreamed about being in. In the case of when I was in the American Hockey League, that's the second best league in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see really, really good up and coming hockey players at that level. The college hockey that I did, again, saw so many people that ended up going to the NHL. It's a privilege to be able to do this at whatever level you're at, and you have to enjoy it. And
Yeah.
that's the most important part. And you look back at those memories, and they're very fond ones, especially after you win a championship. Many times you talk to NHL players and you say, "What are your greatest memories?" And they say that it's not necessarily a great memory, but it's a strong memory, a time that we lost,
Mm-hmm.
because that helped build me into becoming the champion that I became. And I think that that's something to remember too. We all are a product of our entire lives, and you don't want to be that guy that looks down at what you're doing. If you're doing that, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah. I sure like Macklin and Will, when they look back and when they take the Sharks back to where they hopefully take them, they'll look back at last year and say that was an important part of their careers because it helped mold them into where they want to go. And it was a necessary point of their career, too.
Well, I think that's true. And you often see some of these young superstars as they go through their career. All of a sudden, from their earlier years, one of the role players shows up, and these guys are greeting them as if the Pope is coming to town because of how much they respect them. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Ryan Reeves does for the Sharks
Mm-hmm.
this year too. In that regard, he will have instant respect in that dressing room, and I think that he's going to provide a lot of value to some of these young players, and he'll be one of those guys I think that Celebrini and Smith and Colin Graff and young players like that will really, really appreciate. And you see that over the course of time in the NHL and in all sports, really.
Not for opening night against the Knights. Reeves, you send Reeves out there opening shift and say, "Hey, go get him."
Well, you don't send him out to fight. You send him out to play hockey, and and
Yeah.
and, and why not? And of
Yeah.
course, he knows all those guys on the other team, or at least a lot of them. I mean, the Knights lineup has changed quite a bit in the last few years, but that'll always be something for everybody to enjoy, and he'll provide that.
So I want to go back. I was reading one of the articles about you going into the Hall of Fame, and what something that stuck out to me is that you have a theater background of some kind, and it sticks out to me because when I grew up, I started doing theater when I was 6 years old. I did musical theater all throughout high school. I did a semi-professional show here in San Francisco in college. It was something I was super passionate about. I still love going to shows. I still love going to musicals, and I'm already singing with my 3-year-old daughter, and that's always something very important to me. But when I went to go into a profession and I was like, oh, well, going to auditions, that seems like it's going to be really hard. It seems like there's going to be a lot of no's. And now I'm like, well, maybe that was probably easier knowing how our careers or our industry is. But it stuck out to me because that's how I got to where I am. I did theater. I was a performer all my life, but I love sports. And so I married the two, and this is what I came up with. So where does theater fit in your life and dictating maybe where you went with your career?
Well, I'd say it probably ended a little bit sooner than yours did. I was involved in theater during grammar school mostly,
Mm.
and got involved in sports when I was in high school as a player, just trying to perform. And I played soccer. I couldn't play hockey till I was about 16 years old. Unfortunately, I would have liked to have played at a much younger age, but was not able to do that. And so by that time I was going in a different direction, but I didn't love drama club. I wasn't excited about that, when it came time during the high school years. And for a variety of reasons, I by that time was already an avid hockey fan. I was listening to broadcasts. I was enjoying the performance aspect of that, especially the painting the picture aspect of a radio broadcast. Remember, back when I was growing up, most of the games were not on television. They're all on television now, and they're all on radio, so you have your choice of everything. That's one of the great benefits of technology, too, is that, back when I was growing up, you could listen to a handful of NHL broadcasters. Where I grew up in Connecticut, you could listen to all the teams in New York, and at the time it was the New York Rangers and the Islanders for a little while, and then later on the Devils. But then, there was Boston. I could get the WBZ in my house when they were on that station. I could listen to Gene Hart in Philadelphia. I could listen to either Lloyd Pettit or later on Pat Foley in Chicago. I could even listen to Dan Kelly in St. Louis, although KMOX would fade in and out, with the broadcast. But we were always tuned in at, really late at night to try to see what was happening. And so there are, I've just named a handful. And the other one that I could always get was Montreal in French, not in English.
Oh.
So there it was just not understanding a darn thing except for the players' names, which came out really clearly, which I always was humored by. But that's where it all started for me. So the performance aspect that I had learned in theater also, kind of found its way to this particular profession.
Yeah, I think it helped me just be more calm when the light comes on, that red light. You know what it's like to perform. You know what it's like to be in front of an audience, and we don't have audiences. Every once in a while, you have a few people come to the studio, or we're out at the game, so there are some people around. But I think it's just the comfort level for me was the biggest thing about being on stage, knowing that when the curtain comes up, you have to go. Kind of like the show goes on. You mess up a line, someone drops a line, you have to be able to adjust on the fly. And we had that happen this year with Jamal Mayer's IFB goes out and he couldn't hear anything. And so I kind of had to relay with that. So I think theater, for anybody who's in this and asking, what can I do? Going to an improv class is probably super, super helpful because you're always saying yes and you're just kind of trying to figure out what to do on the fly.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think that is a good bit of advice. I've told some young people to do that, and several have taken me up on it, and they've said that it's really helped them. So that, that wherever you can do that, even if you join Toastmasters and you start to do presentations in that way, an organization like that where you're doing public speaking, that's the thing. You have to get in front of people and you have to feel comfortable in speaking to them. And I always say, if you have any stage fright, just look to the back of the theater and they think you're looking at them anyway.
Yeah.
So that's okay. You sort of develop some of the tricks of the trade to help you get through your challenge.
And everyone knows, all the Sharks fans out there know of you as your voice of the radio, but you're super involved with the organization overall on multiple different levels. One of those things that I know you're heavily involved is the sampling with the Sharks, right? Like your reach for the San Jose Sharks goes well beyond just the radio, the audio network. You have a lot to deal with when it comes to San Jose Teal.
Well, that's part of the job that we have, and that's to be a figure in the community, to make sure that you're involved with the fan base. I particularly enjoy a nice glass of wine every once in a while, so being part of the sampling with the Sharks, Randy Hahn and I both participate in that and do a lot of work with the community, and I'm on the board of the Sharks Foundation too, so that's a real privilege to be able to be part of the discussions of exactly who benefits from the Sharks Foundation, taking on what those people are trying to do, and also promoting them on the audio network. We give them, all of the beneficiaries, an opportunity to promote themselves on the network as well. And that's another aspect that I think is important, because we want to be good citizens. We want to make sure that that people not only have fun when they come to see the team play, when they listen or when they watch, but also to feel that we're part of their lives. And that's a real important thing to do.
Glass of wine. I've kind of known that, just some Instagram posts that I see once in a while. Do you have a go-to brand or blend that you, after maybe a game or something, you're opening up and pouring?
I would say that there isn't one in particular, although if you had to really hold a gun to my head and say, what's your favorite varietal, I'd say probably a really great Pinot Noir probably is my favorite, but that's the varietal speak as opposed to the region speak as they do in Europe. So I enjoy red wine mostly.
Yeah, and I was in Eastern Washington for 4+ years, and that was wine country over there. So I got to introduce myself into wine in that manner and not really in the Napa manner, which for me was nicer because over in Eastern Washington in the Oregon, it's a little more relaxed. And have you been out there? Have you experienced some of that, or just wine tasting when you go on your trips? Is that something you like to do when you are on the road?
Well, it's a little bit more difficult to do it during hockey season, obviously, since we actually aren't on a lark on a road trip. We're actually working pretty hard. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we have a few nice dinners together and so forth. I know the region of Washington you're talking about. Walla Walla is a really good wine region, and
Yeah.
I've been a fan of some of the work that some of the winemakers up there have been producing, and it's just interesting to see it develop. And but I'm a pretty loyal local guy too. The
Yeah.
Santa Cruz Mountains is an area that I think that is underappreciated. One of the greatest wineries in the world is there, and in the Ridge Winery that was part of the Judgment of Paris back in the 1970s, a very famous moment for California wines when they basically had blind tastings, and all of the French wine critics decided to pick their favorite wines, and an American wine won, and they were shocked that they picked it, but they had to acknowledge that California was making great wine. And so you start to see that over the course of time, that all of these new regions now are developing that particular enjoyment.
Love Walla Walla. One of my favorite towns that I've ever got to experience, and living so close, we would go out there. Brown out there is one of our favorite wineries, and they have a baseball team, college baseball league. So that was always fun. I just love Walla Walla. And yeah, and Gilroy, there's some wineries out there. Morgan Hill, there's some wineries. And so it's always kind of been a part of my life, but I didn't really get to experience it to the full until I was out there. And yeah, I've learned to appreciate it a little bit more. I'm still not a connoisseur by any means, so maybe I'll need to learn a little bit from your palate, but I'm getting there.
Well, the main thing to remember is that the most important part of wine enjoyment is the food that you're having with it. To
Hmm.
me, it's a nice complement to any great meal. I think that some people, taste wine or drink wine by itself, and you can do that, but I really particularly enjoy it with a meal.
Yeah, food's always better with some type of nice drink to go with it. What is off-season Dan like? I know we're kind of in the doldrums now. It's a little bit dormant, a little quieter at the moment. Of course, we could wake up tomorrow and multiple things happen, but off-season Dan, what's it like for you?
Well, we stayed pretty busy here in the Sharks Audio Network office. We've conducted a number of interviews with some of the new members of the team. We're going to continue to do that to provide our fans with a kind of, as I said, a kind of a longer form way to introduce them and to find out more about them. But we also did a draft lottery show. We did, at the NHL draft, Ted Ramey and I were on the air for several hours while the Sharks had those two picks in the first round and all of the drama that went around it. We had several, we had to prepare with several different interviews that we did. Some we did live and some which were produced just in case we needed to have some extra content. And now it's getting ready for the season. It's contacting all of our Sharks Audio Network affiliate stations and signing them up again, and sending the schedule out and taking a look at what the road trips are going to be like and where we can plan to do some extra content work, and talking with Drew Amenda and I did a playoff show during the course of the playoffs. We've done that the last few years on the Sharks Audio Network, and so we continue that, and we'll come up with some new ideas for the season. So that's kind of the process that we're going through now. It is more leisurely
Yeah.
in July and August, but bottom line is that it's just starting to crank up, and the season's going to be here before we know it.
You needed all the content possible for that first round of the NHL draft. Like 4 hours is way too long, and we're seemingly going to have a decentralized draft again. So I guess over the last couple of weeks, that's kind of been the big news, that decentralized drafts coming out, and then also the schedule. Which one do you want to kind of talk about? Because I think there's a nugget on each, that the decentralized draft or the schedule. I think the Sharks did a great job with their schedule times this season.
I think that there's a mixed bag for me on all of it, actually.
Yeah.
And something, Alan, I like the fact that it's easy to put together a program for the NHL draft. But I think that while it's great for the organizations, for the general managers, and for the scouts and so forth, to do the decentralized draft, I kind of miss the idea of having that big picture sort of event with all the families there, and anybody who might be drafted might be in attendance, and the elation of the people who are drafted, and at the end of the first day, the disappointment of somebody who expected to be drafted in the first round and didn't get selected, and all of that goes on. But I do understand the fact that the organizations feel as if they can have more intimate conversations without the networks reporting on
Yeah.
seeing so and so talking to somebody else. And so that part of it's okay. And then the other part of it too is that it's only a couple of days before unrestricted free agency. So in this way, everybody can be in their command center and stay there until July the 1st. When all of that goes on. So I think it's a better preparation for them. As to the 7 o'clock starts at SAP Center, I again have a mixed feeling about that. I think that it's what I think about all early starts, even if it's a 2 o'clock. I like the fact that there are a lot more afternoon games for
Yeah.
families on the weekend. That's
Hmm.
fantastic. The
Yeah.
hard part about the 7 o'clock start is going to be if you're a Sharks fan and you live, say, in Sacramento, or if you live in the Central Valley somewhere, and we do have fans that come from that far, or from further south down toward King City someplace, you have to kind of change the way that you get to the building. Although it's also going to make it more interesting for the downtown businesses to make sure that they can take care of everybody. I think that basically rush hour is going to start a little bit earlier for Sharks fans. Instead of beginning at 5 o'clock, you're going to have some people coming in at 4:30 for dinner. Most people do work in Silicon Valley, even if they live out in some of those places. So the habit of coming downtown and having some dinner, or coming into SAP Center enjoying some of the new food choices too, which I think are going to be great, is a great option. But the best part of all of the early start is when it's over, because then you can go over and you can, certainly for an afternoon game, you
Yeah.
know, the one I'm looking at, December 31st, that's New
Yeah. New
Year's
Year's
Eve. It's
Eve.
afternoon game, early afternoon contest. It happens to be my birthday, so my wife and I can go out to dinner after that's over.
I
That's a little thing that does happen. And again, that'll be good for business downtown. Post game, I think
Yeah.
that a number of people will start to really enjoy what San Jose is all about, and it has so much to offer. So I think that that's an advantage. But on a broadcast side, I have this, I don't want to say it's a pet peeve, but I really like to start at the top of the hour instead of the bottom of the hour. Like
Okay.
if the game's at 7 o'clock, we're on at the bottom of the hour at
Yeah. Yeah.
6:30. It's not the end of the world, but
Yeah.
it's just a little thing that I've always appreciated or liked to be able to start at the top of the hour. But again, with the changes in technology, that's becoming less and less important. And the more important thing is that the game is on, that we have the programming, and you can get us from anywhere, and people will be listening from anywhere.
I think, like you said, the 7 o'clock, it is what it is. I think, 7:30 might have been a little late when you're trying to get
Right,
some kids there. The
right.
1 o'clock games, I think, are fantastic. It's New Year's Eve. There's one on Black Friday as well. There's a bunch on the weekend. You couldn't take your kids to a lot of games last year. There just weren't a lot of 1 p.m. games. And I think that's huge. If you're growing the fan base with these young kids as well, there's younger, they're teenagers on the team. I mean, Will's 20 now, but I think that's going to be the biggest thing. New Year's Eve, you get out, go have fun. But the 1 o'clock games, I think, are going to be huge for the team.
I agree with that. I think the 7 o'clock games will be fine. I mean, we're used to them on the road. A lot of teams have 7 o'clock starts. So here I am talking about liking to start at the top of the hour. But that part of it doesn't matter. The other part that does affect the broadcast a little bit, though, for all those early starts, including a 7 o'clock game, is the notion of prep time, because it compresses the prep time to make sure that you have your broadcast
Yeah.
together. So that's a bit of a difference. But as I said, when the early games are over, they're great.
Yeah, and hopefully the 7 o'clock games on our side, there might be more studio conflicts because the Warriors, the Kings are both going to be playing at the time. They go about 7 o'clock too. So maybe that means we'll have more on location shows, I love on location shows. I think they're way more fun. So I'm excited for that. We're going to wrap this up though. I've taken you all throughout. We've gone Sharks, we've gone industry advice, and I always like to talk about some dad advice. I know you don't have any kids yourself, but you see dad trips, you've seen dads around the rinks, you've been around this game for a long time. You have your own father as well. Hockey dads, if there's something that stands out that you seem similar or the same about what makes a good hockey dad, what would you say that is?
I'd say it's a variety of things. I'd say obviously the support that they provide their son or daughter who's playing the game is critical, to make sure that that fun is emphasized and that you don't put the pressure on your child to think that they have to be good enough to play in the NHL. The likelihood is they're not going to be,
Right.
but that they can enjoy the sport, they have fun. And the one thing I notice about, the Sharks players' dads is they have their own kind of little fraternity too. They really can relate to each other's journey. When, I remember one time, and it's kind of a famous story, when the Sharks were on their very first father's trip. They went to, it was a back-to-back set of games. One was in Phoenix, Arizona, and the other one was in Dallas. So you lose an hour, by the way, in that travel. That's not an easy back-to-back. And the first night, with all the dads in attendance, the Sharks lost 8-0. And Jeremy Roenick had what proved to be his final hat trick in his NHL career against the Sharks. And I remember going out to the plane to fly to Dallas after that, and none of the players came on to the plane. That's because Doug Wilson, who was the general manager at the time, was really giving them a ration on the bus with all the dads up in the plane. And I remember that the dads were all like looking over, and one father said to me, "Boy, I'm glad I don't have to worry about that anymore." And and then when the players came onto the plane, the dads were like little kids. They were like, "Okay, don't make believe you weren't paying attention. Make believe that you don't see a thing." And it was really, really funny to see that. They have a great camaraderie with each other, and they have a good time, and they're very proud of their sons. And that's the other thing. You have to make sure that that you show and let your child know that you love them and that you're proud of them, because that's something that means everything to them.
Is there a piece of advice your own father or has given you that has stuck with you that you kind of go back to when you in a moment that you need some realignment or anything that just it stands out to you all these years later?
Well, I just say work as hard as you can, be honest, and
Hmm.
be true to yourself, and make sure that you're reliable. And those are things that are really great advice pieces for any kind of career in life. But make sure that you're really enjoying what you do, and that you envelop yourself into what you do.
And as they say, that has nothing to do with talent, right? That's just you taking care of things that you need to take care of yourself. It doesn't matter how talented you are if you're an athlete or how talented you are as a play-by-play person or as a broadcaster. If you just take care of the things you can take care of, like your dad said, those are going to be important things.
Well, that's right, and related to that, remember that especially in the case where you have somebody else in your life. In my case, I'm married, so when we're away, you have to make sure that you pay attention to what's needed at home, and that you communicate at home, and that you never let that person know that you've stopped thinking about them, because they're the most important person in your life. Family is always first, and that's
Yeah.
hockey. The hockey team is like a family, but your real family is the one that you have to pay the most attention to.
And really, that's what I've started to learn here over the last, handful of years. My daughter's 3. I have a new one that's 13 months, and it doesn't matter. Also, the great thing is it doesn't matter. You have a bad show, you have a bad call, whatever it is, they don't care. They just want you to be home. The kids, or even your wife or my wife, they just want you to be back and want you to be part of the family again.
Well, it's the old story, when you're coming home from a long road trip and the lights left on for you, that means they missed you. So that's important. Of course, my wife would say, no, that's not why. It's just because she doesn't want me to get killed going into the dark house. But seriously, it is an important balance that you have to have. The life work balance is very important, and in a career that is challenging, whether you're a player or a coach, especially, or a broadcaster, with our schedules, you have to make sure that you do balance that out. That's why I love those post afternoon game dinners
Hmm.
that you can really enjoy with your family and with your friends. That's what it's all about.
Well, Dan, I hope people came for the Sharks talk and also stayed for the advice, because I thought you gave some great advice here throughout this last 45 minutes or so, and things I will take with me as we move into the San Jose Sharks season, and also hopefully listeners and viewers will take with them. And you learn something. I hope you always learn something when you listen. And I always say the day you stop learning is the day you'll be 6 feet under. So I appreciate you coming on.
100% right, and let's stay above ground for a long time. All right.
All right, let's do it. I'll see you soon, my friend.
Okay. Thank you.